MAGICCON Vegas, baby!
Next on Eternal Durdles. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I'm broke, I'm drunk, I'm laid out, I have nothing to do with myself, and I think that's it. That's all we got today.
Yeah. We're going to go talk about our experience at MAGICCON Vegas, the good, the great, the excellent. I don't really feel like I had any bad times per se, like there wasn't anything that was a complete feel bad for me. Is there anything you can think of?
On your end, you did have to hang out with me all weekend, which, is unfortunate for you. Man, the highlight is who doesn't love pancakes? We had pancakes, I feel like every day for the whole time. I do have some takeaways that, are somewhat informative for us legacy folk that we can get into once we get to the chats and stuff. But we did do two panels. One was a history of the PT, which I thought was really interesting.
Super informative, yeah.
Not only informative, but it was just it was a nice, fun trip down memory lane. Like thinking back to all the back in my day stuff. It's exactly that panel. Like I didn't know that the PT in 2005 or 2006 or whatever was held in the Louvre. It's dope, right? We're over here. I'm over here used to thinking that oh no, we got to go to King of Prussia in Philly, and nothing around but fast food chains. And then I'm hearing 15 years before they were going to the literal Louvre.
Yep. Yeah. I remember in 1999. This was Pro Tour Nemesis. We were at the Armory in New York City proper. It was one of my first times in New York City, so it was a big deal for me.
Zach, you want to hear a fun story? Okay, so
that's what we're here for, right?
My first time, you know me. I've been known to cast a Jace the Mind Sculptor now and again, right? The first time I got Jace the Mind Sculptors was at an event in a hotel across the street from. I guess not Port Authority. What's the train station?
That would have been Penn Station.
Penn Station. Right across from Penn Station, there was a hotel, and they were holding a Magic event. And this was back during the height of Callblade, right? And that was where I first bought my initial Jace the Mind Sculptor. And I remember that event because I didn't know what I was doing. It was standard. I had no reference as to what was good outside of cards I didn't own, right? I knew Callblade was good, but I wasn't yet a diehard control mage. And I brought Infect to that event, dude. OG Infect. And you want to know how my day went?
Did it go bad?
Well, my opponent did the classic, I played a thing that doesn't have an ETB value anything, and then he just Jace bounced it, and that was it. That was the whole game. That
was the game. Back when Jace was good.
Bro, you hold your tongue. Yeah, that's true. Jace sucks now. Yeah, it's not a lie.
So the Pro Tour history one was pretty good. I felt for me, it's always because I'm such a grognard, I always want them to spend more time on the early stuff, especially I know Worlds technically isn't the Pro Tour, but it all feeds into that stuff. And the OG, they did touch a little bit on ESPN2 aspect, and when ESPN2 was a thing, and that was cool. Mike Torian went into talking about that, and that was a lot of fun. To me, that early stage of Magic the Gathering where people didn't even know how to really cover the game, and Hasbro's paying ESPN2 the deuce to do the coverage, and they've got guys that probably did college football to do the coverage. I might be wrong. I'm gonna have to look back at that eventually. I have the tape for Worlds 96, which was the first one that they had on video. I'd love to take that and transfer it to digital so that you and I can commentate on it, which would be really fun.
You know what I realized is that the difference between how the high-end pro scene of Magic is now versus what it was then, there were multiple factors that session, that panel highlighted for me. They didn't specifically say it, but it made me realize that part of the reason that like when we were coming up in the game, why it was so important and influential for us, even if we never actually got there, was the aspirational aspect of being able to get on the train. Of course, everybody remembers that feeling. But the thing that I recognized based on the way that they were talking about the past Pro Tours or major Grand Prix that had significant impact on like player races and stuff, when we were watching the World Championship, Reed Duke top 8'd again. Congrats, Reed.
Yep.
He's a friend of the pod. He had a great run. They were talking about how Reed was in his quarterfinal match, and if he won, he would be player of the year. And if he lost, Simon Nielsen would be player of the year because he had just won his match.
Yeah.
Now, that was the first time I had heard about the player of the year race this year at all.
Yeah.
In any meaningful way, right? That was it. It was like when it was being decided. So there was no drama as to whether or not it was going to happen, other than like I was hoping Reed would win. But what the panel reminded me of is everybody was like, oh yeah, I remember Grand Prix, this place, in this place, we traveled the world, we did all this stuff. And then there was weekly coverage. And the difference between not having weekly coverage and not having events in person, right? That changed the whole paradigm of like whether or not we care about stuff. I realized that like the game itself is important. Yeah, it's the game we're following, but like if there wasn't coverage of those games, we would just not know.
Yeah.
Like back then, if there was no coverage, we would not have followed it at all.
Well, I think another funny thing about that is the amount of static that's out there just about Magic altogether, which is not a bad thing. Obviously, like we're some of that static. But back in the day, like there wasn't a video coverage or video podcasts or anything like that. I had to, they're over here on the shelf. I had to read Scry, Inquest, and Duelist magazine to see what was happening, right? So I would, or I'd get the video later on. That was, like that was how I'd find out about the Pro Tour and about what happened and about what stories they were pushing and stuff. And I think what's really wild is being at these events, because I don't think I've ever been to a Worlds before, but being at these events, there's so much going on, right? And when you're in the event, like when you're there at the event, we weren't playing at Worlds, we were just hanging out, doing all sorts of other stuff. When you're there, all the news of the event just flies right by you. You're not even like there's just too much to pay attention to, and to only pick up on the news that Wizards is putting out there and not be like, on the street doing things like checking out the con itself is almost a waste of time. So I find out that there's a bunch of Lord of the Rings cards finally got spoiled, and like there's a Doctor Who card, and now we've got Dr. Ian Malcolm is on a Magic card, and there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex on a Magic card. So all that I found out like at night when we went back to the diner and like hung out at our hotel.
It is true that when you go to these cons, if anybody goes to them in the future, any of the stuff that they share, like new releases and stuff, you are more likely to know about it if you're not at the con than if you're at the con.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they announce it to the whole con. It's like in one section.
Yeah.
So, when you see it online, like if people had messaged us about like, hey, did you see the new spoilers and the new treatments or whatever? We were like, what? What are you talking about?
Shout out to our Discord who was keeping us involved with all that stuff.
Tangent on the idea of where you were saying that there's so much going on. It was my first time going to a major convention that wasn't Eternal format focused. Right?
Or even a tournament, right? Like, I mean, you've been to Grand Prix that are like modern before, Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. It's like more so that it's like this is clearly like an EDH event, and there happens to be the World Championship as like a side thing.
Yeah.
Like the World Championship was like on the second floor all the way in the back. Like you would not walk by the World Championship. You had to actively be like, I'm going toward the World Championship if you wanted to see those matches or that space.
I didn't go to the World Championship once during the entire weekend. Like we just knew that it was happening.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was out of the way, which, I think is on purpose. But like at the same time, it was like the World Championship of Magic the Gathering, and it was not the center focus of this con, right?
Yeah.
Like very clearly organized play was not at the forefront of this thing. It was much more like you walked in, the first thing you saw was miles and miles of casual play tables. The one thing that I learned from our second panel, which was a Q&A with like Aaron Forsyth and Melissa DeTora and like other people at WotC. We have some shots from us asking questions that we'll splice into this episode.
Yeah, we'll toss those right here.
Hello.
How you doing? Zach Clark from the Eternal Durdles podcast. The question I have is really more based on the next generation of game designers. And Magic is ostensibly a very analog game, and a lot of resources are out there for digital game designers. But if you're a guy like me who doesn't have much of a computer programming background, what is Wizards doing to kind of cultivate a more analog game designer career path?
A more analog game designer
career path.
Career path.
Well, I mean, I would say within the building, like the vast majority of our designers consider themselves primarily analog game designers. We are, most of the company can work hybrid, work remote. Since the pandemic, we've adopted that work style, but our game design teams are dedicated in the office all the time because we know just how much sitting around the table, physically manipulating the cards, is important. We have good online play testing tools. When we have to use them, we can test remotely and all that other stuff. But how you process information is very different in a physical space where you don't have tool tips or a mouse over or a tutorial at your hand. So we have to make things work well for people playing without all the digital accoutrement that you're used to from all the awesome video games that are out there now, including Arena. So we're hiring folks that want to work physically, that want to work in the analog space, and all of the work that they're doing has to work. Almost, I'd say 98% of the work we do is analog first, and that gets translated to digital. We do some stuff for Alchemy and whatnot on Arena, but that just basically is how we think of the game as we make it. It is, I'd say, a purely analog experience. Like, Melissa can speak more to just how we play or whatever. That speaks to the physicality of how we treat the game.
Yeah, we just play in real life all the time. We're in the office most of the week. We build decks out of paper cards. We play with each other physically. I think it's really important to actually play paper games of Magic as opposed to games of digital Magic, so you can actually see the cards in play, kind of see oh, this is really hard to track. I can't do this anymore. This is too much material on the board, or this is too much complexity. So that's something that we really look for, which was really hard to do during the pandemic, specifically with something like the day-night mechanic, where we play tested that only online. So we didn't really get a good sense of how difficult this was to actually play in paper. So playing in real life is really important to us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Step up.
Hello, my name is Phil, also of the Eternal Durdles podcast. I'm going to give a shout to the Legacy community. The Legacy community, or the Legacy format rather, is the one format where cards from the Commander products can also be played in 1v1. And I was wondering what the knobs are, essentially what's the process that goes on, if any, that balances cards that are played in 4-player versus cards that are played in 1v1, such as things like initiative and things like that, and the mechanics of designing for something where you expect it to survive 3 combat steps versus only a single turn cycle. What are the knobs that balance both Commander versus 1v1 for specifically Legacy, but in general as well?
Aaron, you want to start this one?
I think this is one for Melissa.
Melissa, start us off.
Yeah, I can probably take this one. So first and foremost, these cards that are Commander legal are for Commander. And generally, it's okay if they hit Legacy, but that's not the goal. So some things that we do to make sure that things are balanced in Legacy is, first, we do have Legacy experts in the building come in and do a pass with the set and let us know, hey, if there's something up. And if there is, maybe that's fine. Maybe it's a cool card that'll add a lot of fun spice to Legacy. Other things that we think about are we actually take into consideration things like each opponent versus target opponent, because sometimes each opponent scales tremendously in Commander and it's inappropriate, so there are knobs like that we look at all the time. And another thing is Commander cards are often played in cubes as well. So we do think about these cards in terms of hey, what if we want to put this in Magic Online on the Vintage Cube? Is this appropriate in that sense? And Casual Constructed is usually played 1v1. So these are things that our team is thinking about all the time of how to balance Commander versus 60 card.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say, I think you brought up the initiative. That was one I don't think we had our heads around for 1v1 Legacy. I just don't think that was on our radar as how that was going to play out. We had thought about other cards in that product, like Minsk and Boo. I think is really powerful with a pretty cool card, and we had understood that was going to probably be good enough to show up in older formats. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, when you're not thinking about a problem, you don't think you need to solve it, and how Initiative played out beyond the Commander draft format of Baldur's Gate, and then how it would be used building actual Commander decks, that was not, I think that one just slipped by us, honestly.
Oh, I just want to say we greatly appreciate all the work that you do. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So one thing that I discovered from listening to this panel, and it's not that it was something that I was clueless to before, or that any of us were really clueless to before, but one thing I recognized for sure, based on how much of the world around us was like Arena, EDH, like all the focus put towards that, all the new releases put towards that. One thing it told me is that guys like us, anybody else in the Legacy community, we are talking into the void, my guy. Like, none of the stuff we are doing to try and like push Legacy in one direction or the other, like it is so far down on WotC's priority list to like even pay attention to that stuff. And no fault to them. Like that.
Yeah,
they
I
clearly...
think it just becomes apparent when you look at the size of an event like this, where like everyone's playing casual games. Nothing's at stake. They're just hanging out, having fun, and buying cards, and like they're pushing the capitalism of the game is completely in a completely different direction than it was when maybe we started.
So part of what I learned, and this isn't like there's no knocking on WotC here. Like they're doing a lot of work, and most of it is very commendable. The thing that I recognized when I asked my question, I essentially asked like, how do you balance between 4-player versus 1v1, since Legacy and to a lesser extent Vintage are the only two formats that really get affected by the fact that like when you're designing for 4-player, it's really going to fuck up 1v1. How do you reconcile that in testing, if you do anything at all? And I got some workarounds of like, there are people that are behind the scenes working on testing stuff that'll like flag something if it's too strong, which, it's like that sounds good in the moment, but it's actually just a bunch of horseshit, because like if there were Legacy players in the room, there's no way that any of them didn't just go, okay, if I put the initiative into play turn 1, what is the game like? And go, yeah, let's roll with this and not make any adjustments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like there's no way that like that is actually a thing that is happening to a meaningful extent beyond things that like, if they are, so much is slipping through, right? So much slips through. Now, to be fair to them, who knows how much stuff they are actually fixing, and that's not getting to us, given that like the stuff that we're getting is as crazy powerful as it is, because at this point we are for the most part Commander 1v1 in Legacy, right? But the other thing that I want to point out, and all this, I'm listening to myself, and it sounds negative. I promise you, it's not. I think there's a positive that I took away from that panel, which was, if there's anything that we want Legacy-wise in the community, it's on us to do it. And I know we just had Rob on the previous episode, and he's a prime example of like just doing what you want to do, right? Like organizing those types of events, fully proxied, like exactly. Like WotC is not going to help Legacy do any of that stuff. We are so far down in terms of the things that they have to care about.
You're getting Eternal Weekend and Hard Stop.
You're getting Eternal Weekend, which is like the one toss here in the States, and then there's one in Europe, and that's it, right? And even then, it's like, yeah, they support it to some extent because they'll like have a painting or whatever, or like an oversized card as like a win con. But then again, it's still like the tournament organizer that's doing stuff, right? I mean, I'm not totally sure, but all that is to say, my takeaway from Vegas was that if we want anything specifically done for Legacy, it's on Legacy players to figure it out. WotC is not going to do it for us. We can yell at them all we want. We can try and put another sign in their parking lot, or send them pizza saying ban whatever. But if there's anything in the future that Legacy players want to do, it is going to be on us to proactively do it, not relying on hopefully WotC eventually sees us and then maybe takes the time to maybe do something that maybe makes us feel better about maybe the thing that we're complaining about.
Yeah. I agree. I think another interesting point to take from your question and the answers they gave was, they certainly did answer your question, but the follow up to the question when Melissa Del Toro was talking about was answering after Forsyth spoke up was they immediately were like, yeah, we test for Cube as well. Cube is technically a 1v1 format. So there is that, but I thought it was interesting that they even brought that up in the same breath. But I guess because it's a 1v1 format, and they're like, yeah, well, people put these cards into their cubes and stuff, and that's
also a moto format. Cube's a moto format.
Oh,
and they put, I mean, as an example of like where I'm like, okay, well, are you actually? Because even after White Plume was banned in Legacy, they still put it in Cube.
Yeah,
and then it was miserable.
I think it's fine. Like,
it's not fine. It was miserable.
Yeah, well, my stance is like, and then beyond that, you were saying like how much stuff did they catch, or how much they listen to these people. Flagging a card like White Plume Adventure is one thing, but then you have to get to a point where you're like, hey, the marquee mechanic of your set that has nothing to do with the format that we're testing for at present. You guys brought me on to test for Legacy. I'm going to make a comment about it. Like the weight of me saying like, hey, this is going to ruin Legacy for 2 months. There's a definitive possibility they did catch it and they were like, well, we don't care.
I think
it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. That's not what the product is for. Like I think that's also a thing.
There was one thing that I know, like there was a little bit of a balancing act between when, Melissa was like, yeah, we have, people that check on that. We also think about Cube. We are thinking about these cards in ways when they do get to 1v1. But then Forsyth followed up when, he was like, yeah, you brought up Initiative as an example. There's a bunch of examples, but I happen to brought up Initiative in the moment. And he was like, yeah, you brought up Initiative. And, we were not testing that for 1v1, right? Like we were not doing it, right? And that's an example when he came out, and I appreciate Forsyth just being open about it, right?
Yeah.
He was like, "Yeah, that's on us. We just did not test that at all." Like in that regard, because I remember when that panel opened, I knew that I was going to ask something along the lines of how do you balance 4-player versus 1v1, but at the same time, I wasn't going to come at it antagonistically.
Yeah.
Like I was coming at it like genuinely, like we would love to know, like we would love some transparency as to like what is the process of making sure that like, as the commander cards come in and are just objectively busted in 1v1, if you're designing them for 4-player, like it is just going to inherently be more powerful. What are the knobs you turn? And, Forsyth just being like, look, we're doing it. These cards are for commander. They are not for Legacy. And, we weren't thinking about Initiative for Legacy. That one's on us. Like we let that one go. And that struck to me. I was like, okay, if that's the case, then anytime, when people were upset about Bowmasters or, we're thinking about whatever, because when he was like, yeah, we designed Minsk, and he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is going to be powerful enough to see Legacy play. And I'm like, well, it's the best walker in the game now.
For what it's worth, you argued with me about whether or not people would play that, because you said in a day's meta.
I remember this has come up a bunch of times. We just have to pull that episode back up.
Yeah.
Because the first thing I sent to you when I will pull up the receipts and I will send them back to you to put in this episode. The receipts with where I was talking to you and Nate in our text chat, and I saw the card and I was pissed that card existed because I was like, it's a questing beast every turn that draws cards and shoots down permanents, right? And can burn your opponent out. I was like, it's literally every single thing on a card. And I was like, I'm gonna lose to this so much, and I hate it because it's there's no gate, it's just free. And then we as we were talking off the ledge, we were like, oh yeah, Bolt on an ETB, it's a 4-mana Planeswalker in days. And the thing is, at the time when I was like, yeah, maybe it won't see play, it's because that's what I was hoping would happen. I was hoping that it wasn't good enough.
I knew it was bringing up Bolt specifically. Yeah,
I knew it was busted because I knew it was going to be busted against shit that I specifically play. So I was like, I'm going to lose this shit a lot. So hopefully the ecosystem around it pushes it out. That way I never actually have to interact with it.
I know I specifically was super high on the card because I've always wanted
you were rug
mid range to become a thing. Like I wanted to have like a late game for Rug, and after Renin 6 went away, I was like, well, we need something. I don't want to play Uro. You can, I guess, but like I wanted something that was like, like you could have a Sultai mid range deck. There are black cards that like would bring you into that space, but there was really nothing in Rug. It was all tempo or nothing. You had to play Stifle, or you were just gonna lose. So I saw Miskin Boo, and I was like, this is the thing. But we should get back to talking about the con.
The last thing I'll say on this one panel that I think should influence us is as legacy players to some degree, and this is also coming out of me having played pre-modern fairly recently and enjoying that format a lot. I know a lot of people are against like other new fixed formats or other new variations of legacy. People just want to play legacy, and I get it because that's who I am too. But I do think that there is or should be space that we could explore as a community of, okay, if you don't want to play against, essentially if you are a player out there that's like sort of soured on legacy in any way, that WotC is not going to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to keep printing more powerful cards to make more coin that's going to satisfy their biggest base, which is their EDH community. If players are nostalgic for a former time, I feel like, and it's usually always brought up, it's like, oh yeah, 2016, 2017, like we loved that time. That was a great time. And I was like, did we know?
I hate the concept of like the heritage format though.
Yeah, right. So like,
Gross.
That's what I'm saying though. Like the heritage format puts or anything like it puts a really sour taste in somebody's mouth. But like, what I've learned, and I was too, don't get me wrong, like when heritage was first like unveiled as like this potential new thing, I too was like, there's no way, absolutely not. And then I tried pre-modern and I realized how much of a breath of fresh air that environment is. And I feel like there could be other ones that are similar to it, just a little bit further down the line, that's equivalent to like the legacy that we grew up in during the Grand Prix days as a way to like play something that we enjoy that's a little bit, in that space without it being just totally botched by like insane power creep. This is just me saying.
Yeah.
If that is WotC is not going to solve any problems that we think exist in the format. They're just not going to do it. That's not where their headspace is. So if we want to do that, then it's on the legacy community to do so. That's all. That's the only thing, is that like, if you want to solve the problem, or if a group of people in the legacy community would rather something different, it's on you to put it together. WotC is not going to come up with anything.
Final point on that. For me to feel like that heritage is something I would want to do, we would have to move 20 years in the future. That's how I feel about that format. It's like, I'm not nostalgic for Treasure Cruise Delver. It just doesn't like appeal to me at all. Like that, like that era appealed to me because of the people I hung out with, and I like Legacy, like minus like having to deal with Deathrite Shaman for a while. Like I pretty much have always liked Legacy, and I like it right now too. Like I think that the people that want a heritage format are just not willing to pivot, honestly. But like I said, like we don't have to barrel down on heritage format. I want to talk more about the con.
I tangented it.
I had that question, which we played earlier, about the design aspect of the game, which I think didn't get answered great. But if you want to see, we posted the full video where I did all the video, and we have a better sound setup for it. We'll pop that up here so you can see the whole thing. And one of the cool things I think, Phil, about the whole weekend was like participation in like random things. Just they give you a pack. Like they gave us each a collector pack after that. Like that's a $30 value that they just handed you. I didn't expect that. Like it was just cool to have.
Yeah. I think like you can see at the cons they're very free with their product.
Yeah, product was just floating around. When we got when we sat down for that signing, Diana D'Amico came over and was like, hey, here's a quarter of a box for you to just give out to people, like that was really cool. And we got to sit down and like, they really rolled out the red carpet for us. And it was an unnecessary rollout, I think, for us in particular, but I think a lot of the other content creators really appreciated that. It was really cool. I mean, I know I appreciate it, but it just felt like they were doing so much for us that was like, this is not our event, like if they want to do that for us for Eternal Weekend, rad. That's the place for us for sure. But I thought it was really cool the way that they like just treated all the content creators like with like absolute respect, and like gave everybody a little moment in the sun, and we're just like there for them. Shout out to the IHOP water station they had the entire time. MVP was the water station.
The water and coffee station was the absolute nut. We need that every event we go to. Yeah, that one area, I want to say, when we did our little meet and greet thing, I just want to thank the thousands and thousands of people that came out that were like Yo, Eternal Durdles, we love you guys. You know, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we got to play on the arena grand stage or whatever.
Yeah, that was we did the challenge stage. Yeah.
We did the challenge stage where you could watch me and Zach battle it out against each other. And you got me 2 out of 3 games, I think, or
you
2 out of 3
crushed
matches.
me after a while. Like we settled into a rhythm where we both had built our own decks, because we started out just like playing whatever was on there. We're like, wait, we could just like build anything. So I built Teamer Adventures, and you built some like blue-white nonsense.
I built Mind Splice Apparatus, Witness the Future Inevitability combo.
Decklist below, I guess.
Yeah, I
really standard decks.
I lost our last game because I was playing Flow of Knowledge.
I guess
which is
technically, yeah, you did lose that last game.
draw cards equal to the number of islands you control, and then discard 2 cards. And Mind Splice Apparatus just makes essentially your entire deck free. So I was effectively drawing my whole deck and then looping it back into my library, and then drawing it over and over again in the same turn. And there was one turn where I just accidentally drew more cards than were in my library, and Zach got that nice win on the arena stage.
Yeah,
put me to shame.
Yeah, that was super cool. And walking around, one of the cool things was also we just sat down and like played some Commander, played some EDH with folks, which was rad. And we sat down with Honorog, and you played a few games with Honorog, some legacy matches with him. I got to play competitive CEDH. Was like the very first thing I did on Friday. With some people who had like a battle box. That was really cool.
You played Pauper CEDH too, right?
Yeah, that's what. Did I not say Pauper?
Yeah.
Pauper.
You said Pauper CEDH.
Pauper
which is
CEDH.
New thing neither of us had ever heard of.
Yeah. So the idea was like any uncommon legend can be your commander. So they just handed me Abdel in like a blue background, and I played like Abdel into like he would put Mnemonic Wall under him and Peregrine Drake, and then I think I cast like Ghostly Flicker, and like that goes infinite. So that was like a pretty cool thing to do. Just as like learning the format, and the guys that were like running it and like handing out decks to people, super cool. Like we ran into Clay like 4 or 5 times during the weekend, and that dude was just a breath of fresh air every time.
That's the thing. Everybody who's at these cons, everybody is just like so delighted and happy that you want to play cards with them. Although, so we played a couple of CDH games, and we also played some casual, and it was the first time that I played casual ever, I think. I've never played casual CDH before, and when we sat down and we were playing, Zach won with his Watcher in the Water deck where he drew his whole library with Aladman.
We were with Power Dragon for that one.
Yeah, there was a point in the game where I remember I was like, okay, there's enough cards on the board. Like the board was like flooded. Like I had a lot of stuff on it. And most of it was stuff I had either never seen or had forgotten about or never really interacted with in play at all. Like, of course, we've seen it in spoilers and stuff, but I like never interacted with these cards at all. And there definitely was a turning point where it was just the meme where it was like, I'm not reading all that, but congratulations, or I'm sorry that happened. Like, yeah. I'm like, if every CDH game gets to this point, I understand where it would like...
EDH. You were playing CEDH.
Not CEDH, yeah. No, CEDH, you know all the cards. My bad. I didn't mean I misspoke. In EDH games, it's like, I can understand where it's like, if you aren't open to that experience of effectively just being like, you could have replaced the regular EDH, casual EDH game with literally any board game in the world and had somewhat of a similar experience in that, like, we're just hanging out, we're talking, we're chatting, whatever. It's like the game is definitely an afterthought for the most part until you're like, I'm going to make 426 tentacle tokens and then draw my whole library. And everybody was like, sweet, dude, great. Yeah. All right, man, we'll see you later. You know, like that's the whole thing. And it's very different from a competitive environment. But then when we played CEDH, even though it was competitive, it was still in a casual sense. I got Zach loaned me his Krark Sakashima deck, which I didn't know was a competitive deck. I didn't know that like Krark was in a competitive deck, but it just scales. Like the deck itself scales. Like you go multiple times over where you're like, I'm gonna flip coins to like the 16th power or whatever, and it's like, all right, you aren't deterministic, but you're theoretically deterministic.
You were at a point where if you flipped one coin, you were flipping 16 coins.
Right, and for you, Zach, there's a big app for you that is going to help you with that deck that I learned about this past Legacy local that I was at, apparently there's a site, something called the Crarculator, which is
That's great.
which is just exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
It's a calculator specifically for your Krark CDH deck
That's
that will
amazing.
tell you the odds. So rather than having to flip the coins, you can just press the button. It will tell you whether or not, like, what the percentage of you are that you're going to be deterministic or whatever. And it's like, well, that's a delight. You know that
Yeah.
people had to put in some work.
I feel like
make
you
that
have
one
to
work.
like program that, but like put it in like those plastic, like, you know, like the math guy, like plastic calculators, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you can just
Yeah.
be like boop boop boop. Yeah. That stuff was super fun, and then we went on a hunt for altars.
I want, but before we get into the altar hunt, I want to like the shout out to the CDH community for like dying by their own mantra, man. The CDH community, all I ever hear when I listen to content about CDH, they're like, you play whatever the you want. There is no rule zero here.
Yeah.
We are all stepping up knowing that we're trying to kill each other. And then there was one turn where I was just effectively going off for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes or whatever. But like, because it's Krark, it's not deterministic. Like I could
Yeah.
miss on like 6 flips in a row or whatever. So we just sat there, and then I was telling the two guys who we had literally just met, and I'm literally masturbating on the table, right? Like I'm taking all of the time doing all this stuff over and over. Like I am looping, but it's not actually deterministic. And I was like, guys, do you want me to just like display the loop and like, you know, we can call this game and like, you know, it was a good time or whatever? And they're like, no. Like you could miss. Like you should keep going.
Yeah, there was,
and so
and
like,
no one was complaining or anything either. They
no
were just
one-
like, no, do it.
No one was. I was literally taking so many game actions to the point where I was like, I feel weird that I'm the only one playing at the table. And then at a certain point, I'm like, guys, I'm just going to go deterministic like at this. Like now it's to, you know, it's 16 coins for every roll. Like they're like, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right here. Maybe
it's
it is.
time. Yeah.
Maybe it's enough time. But it was crazy because I remember you were also like, yeah, guys, like I think Phil's got it. And then they were like, no, I don't think he could get it really there. And then you were like, all right, Phil, just keep going, man. Like you do
Going,
you.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'll cast this Jessica's Will for the 600th time this turn. That's, you know. So I want to shout out those guys because that was the moment where I was like, they are doing nothing, right? At this table, they are doing nothing. They have not taken a game action in almost 20 minutes, and they're still having a blast.
Yeah.
I was like, I would have conceded a half hour ago. I would have conceded so much sooner. And I could tell that they were just like, no, man, like, we got this.
This is what we're here
Funnily
for.
enough, it's like we're here to watch this happen. I was like, okay, guys, like I don't know what I'm doing, but we're in it together.
Yep. Yeah. And you know, while before we go into the altar hunt, I want to give a shout out to all the creators that we met. You know, Joel from Jake and Joel, Power Dragon, awesome. It was really awesome to meet him in person. You know, Joe Cherries helped us get out there. That was really awesome to them. I hung out the day after the con. We did a little gambling with Veggie Wagon and MTG Nerd Girl, which was a real blast.
The night before then, we got dinner with Bosch and Thraben Yu.
Yep, that was super
a blast.
fun. Yeah, and yeah, it was just really cool. So, like I said, we're one of the smaller content creators there, and it was really cool to hang out with everybody, but also to like not feel like I was wasting anyone's time by like not being like cool, like a big enough draw. Like everyone was just like, yeah, man, let's talk Magic the Gathering. You know, like no one was like, oh, you're too like what? How many followers do you have? You know, like
there was super cool to zero dick measuring. Yeah,
there was none of that. It was really cool, and everybody that we talked to was super into like being like, yeah, like anything you need, like hit me up. Like I'm like it's all about like the rising tide helps all boats. Like it was a really cool experience to hang out with all the other content creators and see that like everybody's just out there to like make the space better for all the other people there.
Yeah, regardless of how big a channel is, everybody was sort of just like everybody somehow still had like a very clear image of themselves in the new creators space.
Yeah.
Right? Before they had a big following or it was their, you know, full-time gig or whatever. Like it seemed clear that everybody was like, oh, I remember when I was starting and how difficult it was. And, you know, I remember there was, I think it was Light who you were talking to, where you were like, you know, he like just started up his own thing and he's like, I'm trying to get over the hump. And you're like, dude, we just got over 1,000. Like, you just got to stay consistent with it, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, I think you're right. You know, and it's like, this is somebody who worked inside WotC. Like, if you were starting a channel, like saying like, I worked there on your resume is a pretty good starting point, you know? And it seemed like everybody just, nobody had gotten too big for the britches, you know?
Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah, it was great.
So let's talk about the vendors and looking for altars and stuff.
This is when I go to these big conventions. This is what I do as the altar guy. I go to every single vendor and I'm like, do you have altars?
Life hack.
Do you have altars? I want to see what you got, if they have any. Most of the time, they don't have anything because vendors don't really value altars. Now, when you go to Eternal Weekend, when you get to like the old school guys, like there's usually like that is a collector sort of thing. You see a lot more altars at things like Eternal Weekend. So I'm way more aggressive in those spaces. But in these spaces, it's like, do you not? Whatever. Sometimes they'll be like, we got these. What do you think? And it's stuff you don't want. And you're like, these look good, but I don't want them. And it's like, but thanks for showing me. And then there's sometimes where you hit a treasure trove and you're like, hell yeah. And I think we spent a good portion of both days that I was there altar hunting. And then there was one vendor in particular where they were like, we have these altars over here. Comes over, just rows of unglued basic lands altered. Excellent.
It's like they knew you were showing up.
And what's nice about a bunch of vendors too is that when it comes to altars on cards for vendors, and this is why I like altar hunting, is it feels sort of like a little treasure hunt, right? Like you get a nice dopamine hit when you find something that you're like, oh, this is great. Is because they don't actually value the altar at anything for the most part. And if they do, it's like a very, very subtle markup from whatever the card is worth. Because in their minds, they're like, this is a damaged card. Like nobody's going to want this thing.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody who likes altars, it's awesome. And so they... like what was it? You got a smokestack?
I got a smokestack and an Anka Mishra.
And I got a curse totem at a vendor, and they didn't price the altar at all.
They were like $5 a piece.
They were going to charge you the price of the card, but they charged it at whatever the near mint price of a card is, rather than a heavily played or damaged version of the card, which is what most vendors do. So they essentially value the altar in whatever the difference is between heavily played and near mint. And when you can find those vendors with good stuff, that feels like a treasure trove catch. So when it came to these unglued lands, I was like, I don't know how many it was like 20 lands or something. And they were like selling them for like the price of, basic lands. And I was like, I want all of them. And he was like, what? And I was like, I would like both rows, please.
Yeah.
And he was like, you want all of these? And I was like, I sure do. And he just counted them up. We exchanged cards. And what a delight! What that was the thing that you hope that happens at every single big convention one goes to. At least if you're the altar guy like me, I hope anybody who has like their own thing that they love to collect, whether it's like a certain kind of variation of a card or a particular kind of collector's edition of some kind or whatever, that when you go to cons that you get to have those kinds of experiences because
it was really cool.
It's a lot of time walking around and you don't hit very often, but when you do, it's a memorable moment. And
So I don't know if you have yours on you or near you, but I have here's the Anka Mishra that I got, which is pretty cool. Nothing like this isn't amazing, but like $5, it's a nice little piece for like a a Punisher pod. But this smokestack,
look how clean that is.
I love that. That's super fun. And if I ever play smokestack in like a CEDH deck or whatever, it's nice and all it is just extended art all the way out. Really nice.
But what's cool about those things is like, anytime you have something like that, every time you play the smokestack, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, this is the smokestack that I got when Phil and I spent X hours hunting at Las Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like now that
now it's got a story.
Experience, that experience is forever ingrained into that card. And it's like it sort of levels up the card, it levels up the experience, which is the point of altars. Whenever I play. Like whenever somebody is like watching 90s or MTG or whatever and they see my altars, whenever there's a comment where they're like, man, I don't like Phil's altars, like Phil's altars I think are pretty bad, or they're like, oh man, I can't believe he would waste so much money to just like throwing up cards like that. And I'm like, for anybody who collects, the cards aren't for the audience, the cards are for you. I alter the cards for me, and then it's nice if somebody else enjoys them. So I hope that anybody who listens finds the thing that they enjoy too, whether it's cards in foreign languages, whether it's mismatched cards in your decks, like whatever it is that gets you off, man. Like I hope you are able to have fun with it, and that there's a place for you to try and find those hidden gems like I got to.
Yeah. So once we did that, we hooked up and hung out with MTG Propaganda MTG Monroe for a little while. BS with Monroe.
So we got to tell the story about what Monroe showed us. We go up to his booth on day 2, and he's like, guys, I have something that I don't think you're ready for. And Zach and I look at each other,
Show
and
us.
we both thought we were ready, and you know, to a degree, we didn't know exactly what we were agreeing to. But he's like, hold on one second. He goes into the back in his little cubby. He comes back out, and he lays in front of us the original Umezawa art, like in the flesh.
Tetsuo Umezawa, not like Umezawa's Jite.
Yeah, Tetsuo Umezawa, like the legend card, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, this is the original art, and it has the authentication on the back with the signature from the artist, and it was just like open, not framed, like exposed to the world. And I was like, are we looking at some MTG history right now?
Yeah,
And you could tell, cool. Prop was like very clearly ecstatic. He's like, I think I have to get this tattooed on my body now. And we were both like, yeah, I guess you do. Like, what else are you supposed to do now? Like, what kind of an experience that is to be like, you know, you go to these places and you just see Magic history, man. Like that was I've only ever cast that card in MTG Brawl in between Masters of Legacy at the local. But like for some reason, seeing the art in person, you're just like, when you see something that classic in the game, you're just like, holy, like the weight of the game is just in front of you. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to convey it, but like you see it's literally just a painting on a piece of paper, right? It's not if you don't know the weight of it after the fact, you just be like, okay, yeah, cool. It's like, it's a painting, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, knowing the weight that it's had on the game since, you're like, holy shit, I am looking at a Van Gogh here, you know?
Yeah. That was super cool. We wandered around to a lot of vendors and looked at a bunch of different stuff. My like, ooh, look at that from the weekend was finding the Micro Pros like Magic the Gathering Chandelar game from like 1994.
Oh, yeah.
That was cool to be like, oh, there you go. That guy's got that.
Bro, there was some history. There was the booth. They were selling old MTG merch from like former
that's right.
Grand Prix and Pro Tours like back in like the late 90s, early 2000s and stuff. $200 for a T-shirt from those old things.
Yeah,
so,
but that, you know, it's not like they're not making those anymore.
No. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, anybody who saved your Pro Tour merch from back in the day, they have scaled like duels.
Yeah,
so
it's funny
hopefully you can get paid.
When I was leaving on Sunday night at the very end, they were handing out posters, and I was like, I don't want to have any more random crap on me.
Yeah.
And then like walking out, I was like, you know, in 20 years that poster's gonna be like, you know, like $400 or something. But yeah,
and you have to hang on to it, but.
Yeah, so we saw a couple. Like we did an interview with the Daybreak crew from MTGO.
Oh, sweet.
And Turbin and Ryan hooked us up with a really cool interview. So hopefully they recorded it and did all the sound and everything, and we can talk about how great that was. So we're hoping to have that soon. We'll have that up on the channel very soon.
Shout out to Torben and the rest of the Daybreak guys, because you know they were great. They were very helpful, and like we even got some like audio insight on like, you know, new mics that we should pick up for the cast from Torben. It was just like
super cool.
He's just super, it's just super open and chill, and like they were happy to talk. And like I know that you had a good combo with
Ryan,
Ryan from Daybreak, and they laid out like plans and stuff, and it's like, yeah, dude. Like
it was funny because
Moto seems like it's in good hands. You know?
Yeah, well, we walked in because they had offered I think the day before they had offered to like do an interview with us, and I was like, okay, like let me figure out how to frame this. You know, I was like, okay, well they've got this new thing, Vintage Jumpstart, which is really cool, and I wanted to frame the interview like that, and so I kind of threw Phil to the wolves because I thought I was gonna have to set up all the mics and everything, and Phil was like, I don't know if I'm ready to just jump in on this interview, and I was like, oh crap, I don't know if I'm ready to jump on this interview. So we sat down, and like it was like butter, man. Like Ryan just took it away. I was just like, hey, tell us about XYZ, and he was like on it. And I think Mike Turbin said to you, I think Turbin said to you, it's just two Legacy players hanging out and talking.
Yeah. Well, and also like the tech that they had there, like Torben had like these mics that essentially like suppressed all of the noise around anything other than the person talking into the mic, and so like it was a loud con. Like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of noise going on. It's not like these interviews were taking place in like, you know, soundproof booths. Yeah. It was, you know, we were. in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, we'll have to edit this like we'll edit normally anything. And then Torben pulls me over. He's like, dude, check this out. He's like showing me the sound waves of like the mics just editing themselves in the moment as you're talking into them.
Yeah.
And it was just like, this is so dope. Like they like you could just tell that they were prepared for a convention, right?
Yeah,
they
they
brought
came.
tech that was like, we are going to optimize our time because we're not going to have to spend any of the editing noise out. These are the mics that are meant for this environment, and they're just going to handle it for us. And then we listened to it afterwards. Crispy clean.
It was amazing. So I'm super
clean.
excited for you guys to get to see that interview, because I think that it gave a lot of really cool insight into what the Daybreak crew goes through, and just the fact that like they're all, it's a format. Sorry, it's a format. It's a platform that's basically for legacy players, right? That they're keeping that around for people like us that play Legacy, right? That want to enjoy a digital version of the game, but the truest version of that
and modern.
Of that game,
and
modern, of course, but like
Eternal
the idea
players,
is like Eternal players, right? So it's really cool to hang out with them and get sort of an insight into the mind, because they're very passionate about what they're doing, which is really cool.
That was if there's one thing to take away is that like all anything where it's like Magic's dying, the death of Magic, like that's just absolute nonsensical noise. Like I left the con thinking like this game will very, very, very clearly outlive me, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever felt better about the game than during that con, and just being like, wow, look at how good the Gathering is doing, like.
And there was just one thing that speaks to that at the panel with the Q&A. Alex Bastecki, who was there, and he asked the question, and he was like, how do you guys calibrate for power creep? Like, how do you not, essentially use up all of the space to, essentially like to the point where you just obsolete a game the same way that like many a game has come and gone from, succumbing to power creep that like just blanked a bunch of cards. And Forsyth answered, he was like, look, man, like, I think the design, I've over my years, I've come to accept that the design space is infinite. And if that is true, which I believe that it is, then whether we are aggressive in power creeping cards or we're conservative with power creeping cards, infinite is infinite, and there will be infinite space to play in.
Yeah.
So like we'll never run out because there's always space to move in because the engine is so robust that we just don't have to worry about it. And like we're conscious not to like make it an experience, like a poor experience for people, but in terms of like how far we can push the needle, he's like, there's no boundary that is that we have to like be concerned with in terms of like, will we or will we not run out of ideas?
Yeah. So let me think of what the other big things from the con were. So again, we did the dinners and whatnot. We'd go back to the hotel, we'd crash, wake up, go to the con. And then on Sunday, you were out like, so Saturday night I went to Phil had a mix up with his badge and bought the Wood and Wisdom thing, which is the Elijah Wood like dance party thing. So that gave me a chance to go to that because Phil was gonna wake up in the morning on Sunday and didn't want to like have to juggle that. So I went to that. It was fine. I was hoping to get a chance to like hang out, meet Elijah Wood or something like that. That didn't happen. But it was really cool hanging out with people. I hung out with Anurag. I hung out with Russell from one of our Patreons, which was really cool. It was really great. It's just awesome meeting people that like listen to the cast. It's like super fun to like just bullshit with people and get a chance to like see that what we're doing actually affects people in some way. It's not just like numbers on a chalkboard. It's really cool to see that like people we're affecting. We're at least giving you some sort of entertainment during the workday or something like that. It's very powerful to me. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
Yeah, getting to meet people who actually listen to that. I mean, we ran into Russell like 4 times over the weekend, and every time it was a delight. That was like a really nice takeaway from the con, even if the con wasn't for Legacy players. Just like the other thing too was that is fun is every time we go to events, you are recognized more for your voice than for you. It's like nobody knows who you are until you open your mouth, and it's like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, specifically, I think with Russell was that he doesn't watch the podcast, he listens. So shout out to that. But yeah, I guess we have very distinctive voices, which is really funny. It's pretty cool to see, to just realize that that's what's going on.
I don't know who said it. I don't remember who commented it, but one of my favorite things ever on the podcast was somebody was like, "Holy shit! I did not realize that you guys look the way you do." And they were like, "What did you think we looked at?" And they were like, "I don't know. We thought you were like super fat and bald and weird looking." Like,
well, they thought I was like a child. You know?
Yeah, they thought you were a little kid, and they thought that like I was some kind of like just they thought I was like some giant dude.
Yeah,
and I was like, "No, we're just legacy bros doing legacy nerd stuff."
Yep.
And they're like, it's so different, like, you know. And now I'm like, you know, when you listen to any other podcast and you've just like made this cartoon in your head of like what the people you're listening to sound like if they have any kind of distinctive voice, and it's like, you know, how far off you can be and how that would change if you knew what they looked like. Like, does your experience change if you're not listening to the cartoon you made up in your head anymore? You know?
Yeah.
Well, I hope that anybody who hasn't watched, who only listens to the pod and hasn't seen any of the videos, don't watch the videos. Then keep that cartoon in your head alive.
You guys still think I'm like a 15-year-old?
Yeah. Zach is clearly just he's just coming out of his adolescence. I am on the end of the road. I'm towards the end of my days, and that's the pod.
Yeah. So Sunday. Phil took off. I went back to the con, and it was really cool. I got to hang out with some guys from my old local because I just ran into them as I was going into the con, and we did a team draft of cons, which was super fun. Like that just brought me back to 2014. It was me and Garrett Gardner and Richard Tan versus Garrett's podcast partner. Now I can't remember the name of the podcast. We'll pop that up here. And we just got to BS a little bit about like where we've been for the last 4 years or whatever. And it was just super cool to hang out with people that like I hadn't seen in a while and get that real nostalgic draft experience going too. That was so much fun. And the other guys that we hung out with during the draft, that was super fun too. And then I went and played more Commander. I sat down with Phil Gallagher, played the Watcher in the Water deck again. Phil was on Dalia, and Phil was pushing to end the game like on turn like 4 or 5. He got out of Balefire Dragon and copied it a bunch of times and attacked. And I had Aether Spouts, so I Aether Spouts his board, but like. He was going to just run over everybody at one point. And then the guy who won, there was like an Elves deck and a Life Gain deck. And the guy who won was the Life Gain deck because he put out Feldar Sovereign. And I Nimble Obstruction to the first trigger, but I must have drawn like 40 cards in the next turn and couldn't figure out a way to get rid of it. And yeah, that was, for the most part, that was the weekend. We just played Magic, hung out. I said my goodbyes to everybody. I thanked everybody that I had seen, and went back. I went back to the hotel, had a pork chop dinner, and that was my weekend.
Yeah, the takeaway at the end of it is Vegas has some of the best pancakes in the world. Holy shit!
So we stayed at the Boulder Station Inn, which was a little off the beaten path. But let me tell you, the value there, like, one, we have the casino access, relatively quiet casino in comparison.
It's an old-timey casino that clearly hasn't been updated in 40 years. Everybody's smoking inside. It's actually like everything is brown and dark, and they don't let you know what time of day it is.
Yeah.
And it's like if you are not 82 years old, it is not the place for you. However, man, do they have a hell of a diner in there?
Yeah,
man.
they had like a pretty decent Mexican restaurant. They had the diner was just like, it was what was it? The griddle special was like $9 for like 3 pancakes, 3 eggs, and bacon or sausage links.
The place is called the Brass Fork, and if that place was anywhere even remotely close to me, I would be there every single day of my life.
Yeah.
I would eat so many pancakes, I would turn into the cartoon that person envisioned I looked like when they heard my voice for the first time. Like, it was like I could eat those pancakes every day. Oh my Lord.
Yeah. And like, that was the thing is like, we wanted to stay off the beaten path a little bit so that we could save some money. And I didn't realize how much money we were going to save because, we went out to dinner we went to that French restaurant with the Eternal Glory guys. And, it was $100 night. Well worth it. It was tasty food. But like, I think every other meal we had was around $10, like, so that was the hack really.
It's also like, you got to have the experience. You got to shell out one time when you're at the con.
You got to have
for like for one of the high end food places, right? Like, what is this world if you're not eating good cuisine?
Exactly.
But like, if we were like, hey guys, we have to get the top cuisine in the area, and somebody was like, and it's the griddle special at Brass Fork, I'd be like, hell yeah, fuck yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It was an absolute delight, that place. And they were the only place that was open 24 hours, which was also excellent.
Yeah.
It's just like that is my takeaway. Altars and pancakes.
Yeah, altars and pancakes. Shout out to Joe Cherry's, Christian and Amara. We went out for like Indian food on Sunday night. The Indian food place was super good. Good samosas. Had some really good conversation, like 90s nerd conversation with Amara about like Mystery Science Theater 3000 and horror movies and stuff. That was a blast. And then the next morning, I already talked about the brunch we did at MGM Grand. It was like that was the first like real buffet I've ever done. So I had sushi and pancakes in the same meal.
Combination, blessing of a combination for sure.
And then final note. So I was like, you know what? I haven't like blown the load on this this trip, so I can afford to take out $100 and I'll gamble with $100. And we sat down at the 1-2 no limit hold'em table, and about 4 or 5 hands in, Nerd Girl goes all in, and I looked at my hand. It was pocket fours. I was like, this might be the only time I get like a decent hand. I think I kind of have to go in for this. So I went all in. Then the guy next to me went all in. Then the guy next to them went all in. And so it was like $500 was like in the pot. And, it finally gets to the end. And I didn't hit. I had just a pair of fours. I think Nerd Girl had Ace King and caught the ace on the river and took the whole pot. Before that, the guy like over to the end was going to take the pot. So it was awesome to see, like, sure, shitty I lost, but like the money stayed in the crew, which was good. And like I think she like quadrupled up, which was pretty rad.
That's the way to close it out, right? You get to play another card game, and hey man, think about like you spent $100 on a really memorable moment at the card tables, and that would have been your entry at a Grand Prix, and if you didn't top 8 at the Grand Prix, it would have been the same way. And
I wouldn't have known who I was giving the money to.
Yeah, right.
The Grand Prix, right? And then I went back to my hotel and hit the pool. One of the cool things was that they let me, like, this is the other great thing about the Boulder Station Inn. Before we sign off completely, I went back to the hotel and was like, hey, I don't fly out until 11 p.m. Any chance I can just like use the pool and like put my stuff in the back? And they're like, we can just give you a room to like put your stuff in, for until you leave. And then that way you'll have a place to like crash for a moment if you need to. And I was like, this is amazing. Like they just like totally hooked it up. I went, hung out in the pool, grabbed a beer, just had like an IPA by the pool, did a cannonball, it was just like a nice little thing. Went back to the airport and my flight was only delayed by an hour, which wasn't the worst. And
that's not running too bad.
Yeah.
I was my first flight back was delayed that I missed my connection and then had to roll over.
That's the worst.
But fortunately, though, I caught that rollover, which was I got one of the last 3 seats on the last flight of the night back to LaGuardia.
Oh.
So had I not been there as one of those last 3, I would have been rolled over to the next morning in Charlotte, where I would not have had a place to stay. I wouldn't, because it was late at night. So it would have just been, okay, I guess we're sleeping on the airport floor had I not caught that last flight. So we were running hot at the end.
Was that Tom Hanks movie where he's like stuck in the airport? Could have been like
Castaway.
No, not Castaway. Castaway is not the one where he's stuck in the airport.
No, yeah.
It's like Castaway, but for airports.
No, dude, I'm pretty sure he was stuck in the airport in Castaway. I'm pretty sure he like.
You had a
volleyball
lands. With you?
Yeah. He's just like
Yeah.
he's just like talking to TSA. He's like, please, I got to get on this plane. They're like, sorry,
Yeah.
we're not actually here.
But yeah, that was our experience at MAGICCON Vegas. 10 and 10. Would MAGICCON Vegas again? Actually,
I'm very excited. What this con showed me, what the one thing that I really was like longing for, because the con was awesome. The only thing I was longing for was like a competitive legacy event. That's really what I wanted, and so it just hyped me up even more for Eternal Weekend. So.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you were like on the fence about whether or not to go to Eternal Weekend, Eternal Weekend's always great, but it's like, you know, now having gone to the other cons, like I realized like, yeah, Eternal Weekend is really the highlight of the year for Eternal Magic, and it's like, if you can make it, you should swing it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for us, everybody. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Comment below if you were at the con and we missed you. Comment if you're going to Eternal Weekend. What are you bringing? That's it for us. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks. Hey, thanks for watching, and you can check out that full video of the Q&A with Studio X right here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Thanks so much. Bye.